twoguyshows.com. I'm Chuck Whitaker with traffic on the Man Talk Network.
This is Paul Porter, the arena voice of the Tampa Bay Lightning and press box voice of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, inviting you to join me, Jason Alessi, for the home team every Saturday from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. here on the Tan Talk Radio Network and Facebook Live, the home team with Paul Porter. Special guests, prizes, and your phone calls about the Bucs, Lightning, Rays, USF, Sun, FSU, Florida, and more. Talk to you this Saturday at 9 a.m. right here on the Tan Talk Radio Network.
Hi, I'm Dawn Reese with the Dawn Reese Show, most powerful names in entertainment, every Thursday at 5 p.m. I have so many different segments I'm so excited to share with you, from miracle stories to celebrity interviews with Hollywood connections to travel to local business, promoting your business on the air with me, an amazing opportunity to grow your business. Tune in to the Tan Talk Radio Network, 106.1 FM on Thursdays, 5 p.m. with me, Dawn Reese.
Check out the Randall Jenkins Real Estate Hour every Wednesday from 5 to 6 p.m., where Randall will help you with things like down payment assistance, real estate tips, how to use AI to enhance your real estate experiences, real stories about real estate, nightmares, and triumphs. Also taking your phone calls and much more. That's the Randall Jenkins Real Estate Hour every Wednesday from 5 to 6 p.m. here on the Tan Talk Radio Network.
Don't turn it off now. You need this stuff. Tampa Bay's Tan Talk Radio Network.
You are about to enter the arena of real news and factual commentary on the Voice of Reason here on the Tan Talk Radio Network. Now, here is your host for today's program, Ed Golly.
Well, Todd Blanche is campaigning to become our real confirmed Attorney General, presumably so he can better help Donald Trump and his corrupt crime family and the 13 billionaires in his cabinet make off with as much of our money as they can. Also on the program today, the latest developments in Iran and a perfectly legal way to steal the midterm elections. We'll talk about that in the second hour of our program. My co-hosts in the Tan Talk studio are attorney and former circuit judge Kevin Carey. Hey,
hello,
Kevin.
Ed. Good to see you.
We're also joined by attorney Tom Skerritt from Tampa. Tom, tell us quickly about your law practice.
Thank you, Ed, and appreciate you inviting me again. Skerritt Law Group is in Tampa, specifically Hyde Park. We do serious personal injury and commercial litigation, trial work.
Very good. Well, we're going to open by talking about Todd Blanche and the prospect of him becoming the permanent Attorney General through the rest of the Trump administration. Let's listen to Texas Senator John Cornyn explain why he caved on the vote to confirm Todd Blanche.
The president was saying as recently as yesterday that he likes the idea of this fund, that he wants to find some way to pay these people. Does that concern you as someone who's tried to fight against getting this anti-weaponization fund in place?
Well, there's nothing we could do to rein in the president when he said he likes the fund and he wishes it still exists, but the fact of the matter, it's dead. And that's all we could do under these circumstances.
Kevin, talk to me.
Well, he did cave. I mean, he did. That's all he did was cave. We're their position now worse than before. He and Tom Tillis from North Carolina claimed to be, standing up to Trump, as Sheldon Whitehouse stated during the Senate Judiciary Committee hearing earlier in the week when he was confirmed on a purely partisan vote of 12-10, which is what the committee is comprised of. He's the most unqualified, disqualifying candidate we've ever had for Attorney General. And it's disappointing that both Tom Tillis and Cornyn caved. I don't know why. I mean, Trump made it one of his tasks and successfully to make sure that Cornyn's career ended, as well as, although Tillis wasn't primaried, I think Tillis did not run again because he was going to be primaried by Trump.
But the assertion that Blanche is no longer Trump's personal attorney is absurd. It's the whole reason he's been selected for this, is to protect Trump from all the crime he's committed, to make sure that the Epstein files never get released. Am I wrong?
Yeah, well, let me respond to that. John F. Kennedy's attorney general was his brother, Robert Kennedy. If you go back in history, the father apparently was one who told his son, John F. Kennedy, that his brother was going to be attorney general. and John F. Kennedy was not in favor of that, but his father, Joe Kennedy, before he started having, had a stroke. The point is,
I remember Kennedy, when asked about it, said, well, you remember he had never tried a case. He'd graduated from law school. So he had a law degree, Robert Kennedy, but he'd never been in court. So he said, well, we decided we'd give him a little experience before he went into the law practice. How condescending, but funny.
Yeah, he went to the University of Virginia Law School, and he was counsel for Joe McCarthy. Back, so he went through a few transformations. But my point is, the fact that he was Trump's personal attorney in and of itself doesn't, to me, disqualify him. The point is the actions he's taken that are solely consistent with what Trump wanted is the problem. Because I said I don't think we can be a hypocrite and say, well, yeah, John F. Kennedy's brother was his attorney general, and you sure know he spent half the time in the Oval Office. But the conduct on the part of Blanche has shown that he's disqualified.
And then Congress did actually enact legislation to prevent that kind of
nepotism.
Yes, in the future. Am I right? I think they did.
I think that's correct. You can't be your brother can't be the attorney general.
Yeah.
I think the fact that he has tried to be on both sides of the deal on the settlement, the IRS settlement, shows that he's not qualified. If he doesn't understand that that's a glaring conflict of interest, here he is saying, I represent the president who has in essence sued himself, and so I'm also representing the IRS. I mean, and then they settle with themselves. This is if this were on a law school exam, it would be a gimme, because he should know that you can't do that. He's doing it, and he's doing it with a straight face. Here he is, he is sitting, to request the authority that the acting attorney general, more than the acting attorney general, the actual attorney general, and it doesn't even acknowledge the conflict of interest.
Well, and as Tom and Ed, don't take our word for it. Just read the opinion of the federal judge who sanctioned Blanche and other attorneys for Trump, who made it very clear. I would refer our listeners and viewers to that federal court opinion where the court was very bothered by what she considered a scheme and a fraud on the court. Language you don't hear that often from a federal judge. Also, in terms of Blanche, I would again, we don't have 2 hours, and we could spend 8 hours on this topic. But at the hearing the other day, I'm going to hear a little bit, I know, from Sheldon Whitehouse. But I would again recommend to our listeners and viewers that they listen to Sheldon Whitehouse's, Adam Schiff's, and Cory Booker's, all three Democrats on the Senate Judiciary Committee, their comments, very specific comments about why Blanche is not qualified to be Attorney General.
All right, let's hear Whitehouse now as he offers up just one of hundreds of issues he says concern him and should concern all of us.
Today, I think, is a sad and embarrassing day for this committee. As it looks like on a party line vote, we are going to advance out of this committee probably the most discreditable person ever to seek the office of Attorney General of the United States. The reasons to vote against him number in the hundreds, but let's just focus on a few where my Republican colleagues purport to have great concern. Let's start with the Epstein files, where Todd Blanche participated in the cover-up, continues to participate in the cover-up, and is responsible for a massive screw-up of the release of the documents. Cover-up and screw-up on the Epstein files. What do I mean by cover-up? Well, first, they looked at 4 FBI 302s that were the testimony of a woman who told the FBI in a formal statement that she had been sexually assaulted and physically assaulted by Donald Trump around 13 or 14 years of age. Of those 4 302s, they released one, the one that did not mention Donald Trump. Well, fortunately for transparency, These documents had been released in other areas and bait stamped. So people figured out that some were missing. And with that, the other 302s that mentioned Donald Trump had to be produced. Only because they got caught were those 302s produced. And right now, Todd Blanche is still sitting on 37 pages that are almost certainly the agent's notes off of which the 302s were taken. That should be disclosed under the Epstein Files law, but instead, those 37 pages remain covered up.
Yeah, but by the way, Blanche did have to give to the federal court last Friday the unredacted documents from that were in compliance with the statute that Trump signed into law back last November, the disclosure statute regarding Epstein. So we'll see what the judge is going to do with that. But there's no question that both Pam Bondi and as Attorney General and now Blanche as acting Attorney General have not complied with that statute's requirement that they not only produce the documents but provide what are called privilege logs as to what's not being produced and what's been redacted.
So we can rest assured that we're not going to see Epstein files until November, and then only if the Democrats take control of at least the House of Representatives. At that point, and you guys tell me if I'm wrong, can they call Blanche in, assuming that he gets approved as the Attorney General, and give him a directive? You will obey the law that said these things were supposed to be released 11 months ago. You have 10 days to release the unredacted 3 million pages, or we're going to find you in contempt and you're going to be sitting in jail until you deliver them.
So the answer is yes, they can do that. They can bring him in, put him under oath, which is important because a lot of this testimony is not under oath, so they're not going to be held, to what they say. But put him under oath, ask him about the Epstein files and why he has not, and why his predecessor have not both complied with the law. It's very simple. Produce them unredacted now. That was what they were told to do. When he doesn't, he's not going to, I think he's going to dig the hole further. And he's going to back up Trump and say, all the excuses they've already given us. Oh, there's too many of them. They're over 3 million. We're doing this in a dutiful way. It just takes a lot of time.
Got to protect the victims.
You got to protect the victims, although they published the victims' names.
They were standing on the steps of the Capitol.
Yeah.
Right there in plain view of the public.
Yeah, they weren't too concerned about the victims' names and their privacy. But yes, they can do that. The problem is that as soon as they give a contempt order, there's going to be, some attempt to stay it, or to, try to get the courts involved and say this is all a witch hunt, which it's just the opposite of a witch hunt. It's a hunt for people that really are witches. But, yeah, they can do all that, Ed. And that's why I think we have such an opportunity, because all the polls are showing that if we continue to push hard, we continue to make that pressure, I think that we could actually see that.
Yeah, regarding, by the way, Blanche's efforts to actually be approved, that's not a given. In fact, John Thune, who's the president of the Senate, acknowledged that yesterday. But you have, now that we've already talked about Cornyn and Tillis Cade, because again, they could have prevented it from even getting out of the committee. That would have ended Blanche's chances to be Attorney General. Now he still needs a majority of the Senate, which he doesn't have, because it's as you know, Ed and Tom, it's basically a 53-47 right now in favor of Republicans. But Susan Collins, who's got a very tough re-election battle in Maine, has come out against Blanche. You've got two senators that are going to make the difference. Bill Cassidy, who was primaried by Trump and lost in the primary out of Louisiana, and Lisa Murkowski out of Alaska, who's also, she's not been one to just, kowtow and kiss Trump's ass on a daily basis like most of the Republican senators do. So if Cassidy and Murkowski join with Collins and missing Mitch McConnell is still out of commission, that would be a 50 no and 49 yes, and he would not be affirmed. So the issue is, what do Bill Cassidy and Lisa Murkowski do in the next few days?
Well, Katie Fang is yet another lawyer, political commentator, podcaster on Media's Touch. And she's a former television host who previously hosted the Katie Fang Show on MSNBC, which is now MS Now, up until 2025. And like everyone else, she offers a rather expressive opinion of the nomination of Todd Blanche.
Blanche has just tried to pull a fast one. And listen, maybe he has succeeded to pull the wool over the eyes of Cornyn and Tillis. But I am stunned that any other lawyer who serves on Senate Judiciary, of which there are several, would ever think that this is an enforceable piece of paper. Here's the other. Is it posted on Twitter? Am I supposed to be able to reference it now in the legal filing in Twitter? Why are we still appealing? What are we appealing, Trump? Remember, Trump brought this lawsuit in his private capacity. He didn't bring it as the president of the United States. And despite his emphatic swearing and protestations otherwise, we all knew that this also was trying to use his job as president to be able to influence the outcome of this. My mind is boggled at how completely fakakta this all is. And yet, what? This is now enough? What about the Epstein files, Senate Judiciary Republicans? Have we forgotten about that? Tom Tillis, were you really just so okay with Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche sitting there and being a disrespectful to the Epstein survivors and the advocates saying, get to your point, or I have nothing to investigate. Nobody has given me any evidence. Why are the Epstein files suddenly not an issue for this confirmation of Todd Blanche? Why? Because we know that Republicans are ballless wonders. They have no spines, and stop making Cornyn and Tillis profiles in fucking courage, because they're not. None of them are. Unless you vote no, you are not a profile in courage. Putting aside the next thing, Todd Blanche, as I've explained here, was Senate confirmed last year. He's the acting attorney general after he was Senate confirmed as a deputy AG. He can serve as the acting attorney general. You do not have to vote him through. It is just the stupidity. The stupidity just abounds.
Man, I'd hate to have to argue with that woman about who's going to do the laundry.
You know, Ed, I just mentioned a few minutes ago that the case where the Blanche has to produce the unredacted emails, that is the Katie Fang case. You know, she had the chutzpah and the courage to actually sue under the statute, and she obtained a preliminary injunction, and she's the reason that Blanche is having to put up or shut up with this federal judge.
And of course, she was also talking about the lawsuits over I guess both the weaponization fund and the IRS protections that Trump wants for himself and his family.
Yeah, that was another reason Cornyn and Tillis caved. And I heard Tom Tillis on the radio driving down here from Gainesville this morning early, and they were very defensive. You cannot in any fashion justify what Trump did with his Tom, as you mentioned, pretty much suing himself, and just this cute scheme, as the judge called it. But that part hasn't really even been discussed much today, but that's as big of an issue as the other one, that he pretty much wants, billions of dollars of immunity for tax consequences.
Right. And the interesting part is that some of even the Republican senators, they wanted more certainty in the settlement document. They said, this thing sounds kind of loosey-goosey. So they put in a line that says that the settlement document can't be altered in any way except by consent of the parties. Well, again, they're on both sides of the deal, so they have to consent with themselves to change it to whatever they want it to be. So it's absolutely worthless.
You talk about tap dancing, and the reason that Blanche could not commit further, because Trump got on the phone and said, I'm not going to sign anything. As you mentioned, Tom, the party is Trump, and the IRS, who's also Trump, as you said, basically is suing himself. So it was a lot of dancing. Again, we're going to add Blanche to our list of lawyers for Trump who are most likely going to lose their bar license once the dust settles.
And on that note, Kevin, may I give my little statistic?
We may have to update it every couple minutes, but go ahead.
Well, this is, let me find my notes here. Trump's past lawyers versus the lawyers of the previous six. Okay, here it is. Previous six presidents. Trump's previous lawyers convicted or disbarred 10, 10, right? And that's and counting, because Pirro's up. She'll she'll likely be disbarred. Blanche thinks he's going to, avoid the fate of all of his predecessors. He won't. So the previous 6 presidents combined 0. So the batting average right now is 10 for Trump and 0 for the 6 presidents.
Yeah, so you're getting disbarred, going to prison. Talk to Michael Cohen if you have any concerns. And Pam Bondi, who's no longer Attorney General, has a very serious amended bar complaint. So we'll see what happens. And go ahead, Tom.
No, and on that note, the bar original bar complaint against her was signed by the number evades me, 37 or 40 very prominent justices from the Florida Supreme Court, appellate judges, prominent lawyers, bar leaders, and the bar dismissed it because she was the actual Attorney General. So we don't prosecute against someone who's actually the Attorney General. That would be distasteful. But now she's not Attorney General, so she's fair game, and they're going after her.
Yeah, they said that the bar said we're going to hold off doing anything against her till she's no longer Attorney General. And it was, in fact, the complaint's been amended. It's even more serious now. So she's, again, maybe these people don't care. Maybe if you're Rudy Giuliani, you've been disbarred. The list goes on and on.
Yeah, I mean. And to be fair, Clinton was disbarred too for his activities, and but how much he cared? 0. He wasn't going to practice law.
Well, with all the other headlines making news in Washington this week, perhaps none is more surprising than Crooked Donald's fallout with his longtime friend and appointee Jeanine Pirro, the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia. Now, what came between the former Fox News host and the president? Something near to his heart, one of his pet beautification projects. And that, of course, is the renovation of the Lincoln Memorial Reflecting Pool, and his stance that his promised cleanup failed because of anti-Trump vandalism. You'll remember, fellas, it was slated to cost $1.8 million and be finished in a week or two with no leaks. It ended up costing, I think it was $14 million, demonstrating once again Trump's astonishing expertise as a builder. And then it turned green. Well, based on Interior Department evidence, Pirro said she charged an Olympian canoeist named David Hearn with a felony for allegedly causing the damage. On Friday last week, she dropped the charges, blaming it instead on a botched construction job. Trump sharply criticized her, angrily saying she had choked and folded like an umbrella. Play the cut, Ed.
Trump's Department of Justice making a major retreat in court this week, moving to dismiss charges against Olympian David Hearn, accused of vandalizing the reflecting pool. The administration claimed it was a slam dunk case. The U.S. Attorney for Washington, D.C., Jeanine Pirro, giving a press conference on July 2nd.
The evidence shows, and we will prove beyond a reasonable doubt, that Hearn willfully destroyed property at the Lincoln Memorial Reflecting Pool.
The Secretary of the Interior appeared just 3 days later on This Week.
What specific evidence do you have to back up that claim?
Well, we have the actual cuts that were made into the industrial liner, and that's been measured out. So that's just a fact that's what we've got to go back and repair.
There's a 350-foot gash?
Well, it's multiple gashes that add up to 350 feet across that. And again, some of this happened early on. There was where we've installed more cameras.
But you don't have video evidence of people making those gashes.
We do have video, and we do have eyewitness reports, and that's up to the courts now. So that process will go forward in the legal system.
But in an email released in court records Friday, a National Park Service engineer under Burgum's department had already blamed an overspray 3 weeks earlier for causing damage to the reflecting pool. In those same court filings, Pirro also doing an about-face, saying the damage to the reflecting pool was caused by flawed installation by the contractor, not vandalism. Trump, however, posting Saturday that he disagrees 100% with Jeanine Pirro, calling it a pure case of vandalism. Hearn's attorney saying the case should never have been brought, calling it an abuse of government power.
At some level, there are different levels. At one level, this is some BS case about, a poorly constructed repairs to this pool. On another level, I think more important level, Ed and Tom, this is a very serious example of continued abuse of the Department of Justice by this administration. And Jeanine Pirro, I've got no sympathy for, because she's decided she's going to get in bed with the devil like Pam Bondi and Blanche and all these other sycophants. But they did no investigation. She's if you read her, and I've listened to it, and I think you may have read the motion to dismiss, she pretty much threw the Department of Interior under the bus, saying that the DOI, we found out later that this was more a construction issue, which is what was stated by the defendant and other people from day one. And there was no reason for her to shoot first and ask questions later. It's an embarrassment. There's no doubt Trump mandated that this occur, and Trump does not care if there's a valid basis for a grand jury indictment.
Yeah, let me follow up on that, Kevin. So Trump used to care more about keeping his lies straight. Okay, when you have as many as he has, that's a difficult task. But he at least tried, or he would make up a new lie to cover the old lie. I mean, honestly, if Trump says anything like, I think the sky is blue, I'd walk outside and look up there and make sure. But in April of 2026, he said, I have a guy who's unbelievable at doing swimming pools. I'm going to send my contractor over and take a look. And then he follows that with saying, I'm going to call 3 of these people that have worked for me in the past doing swimming pools. And then the next statement is, the contractor suggested to me the color patriotic blue, and he talked me into it very easily. Yet again, he says in May of 2026, I have some very good contractors, and I sent over the 3 best. Okay, so he's laid out, over and over again, his involvement in the case. But when the coding problems developed, he said he was not 100% satisfied with the contractor because he was rushing to meet the deadline. And then he finally comes out, here's the big lie, May of 2012. I didn't give out the contract. The Interior did, to a contractor I did not know and have never used before. So, like I said, he used to care more about keeping the lies straight, but he seems to have abandoned that. And the question is why? And I think it's because his dementia is progressing rapidly. He can't speak in a comprehensible way. He sleeps during cabinet meetings. He has confusion regarding names, and he lacks impulse control. Not that he ever had it, but he's even become worse. Let's see the Iran war. He doesn't care about what anyone thinks. And again, there's a good argument that he never did, but it's gotten worse. It's intensified. He doesn't seem concerned about the midterms. All right. He has plans to, quote, reschedule them, even though he can't do that. Only Congress can do that. He plans to disrupt them legally or by force. And you hear the Insurrection Act being thrown around. There is a federal law that prohibits federal troops to be present at polling places during the elections. And here's the language: unless necessary to repel armed enemies of the U.S. Well, in that case, the only armed enemies are going to be the soldiers that are out there. So I think that the reflecting pool is a microcosm of what's happening with Trump and his demise. And it's very, very disturbing.
I agree with everything you said, Tom, but it is a serious abuse of the grand jury and the Department of Justice. The motion that the attorneys for David Hearn filed, who was an Olympic canoeist, I didn't even know they had Olympic canoeing, honestly, but it said they called the indictment a politically motivated prosecution. The case against David Hearn was, quote, motivated by political considerations and devoid of adequate factual support. The DOJ has repeatedly demonstrated its willingness to seek or reinstate criminal charges to satisfy the president. And this is the key part: irrespective of the law or facts. Again, this is not about politics. I mean, to go to a grand jury, as Pirro did, and she waffled later, but she was very clear when she gave her press conference, mandated by Trump, that there was no question that this felony had been, it wasn't just I don't think a misdemeanor, it was a felony.
Right.
this guy who happened to be there. So she's looking at bar issues. I think she's going to be fired. I mean, Trump throws her under the bus in a heartbeat, says she choked, said she folded like an umbrella, I guess, as opposed to a cheap, what's the other say, a cheap suit.
Yeah. And so, and you got to remember, grand jury investigation is intimidating. Okay. They can file by direct action, or they can drag someone before the grand jury. And in the grand jury, again, I haven't done it, but I have lots of friends who have. They have the person who's accused has no right to counsel. So the prosecutor gets to go in, show the jury all of his or her evidence, and what's the grand jury going to do?
And there's no defense counsel.
There's no defense counsel. That the accused doesn't really know what his or her rights are. And this is a woman who said that there was tremendous evidence, and that based on this evidence, that they're going to go forward. It's not political pressure, when it was exactly political pressure. And like you said, Trump, she folded. She did fold because she realized that she's endangering her bar license. She was going to probably be number 11 in our batting count, but she folds. Trump's furious, and what does she do? She throws the Department of Interior under the bus. Mm-hmm. That's the Trump way. That's the Trump way. If you get caught with something, blame it on somebody else, and that's what she's doing. And so I think she saved her job, at least for now, by mimicking her boss.
Well, if there's any doubt about that, our buddy Trump is a misogynist. Look who he's fired from his cabinet: Pam Bondi, a woman; Kristi Noem, a woman; Jeanette Pirro, last I checked, was a woman. So I do think there's some sexist kind of prejudice with him too. But kissing Trump's ass, if you'd listen to Michael Cohen as he went off to federal prison, gets you nowhere. And if you care about your bar license, and I can represent that both attorneys around this table still have a current bar license from the Florida bar, which we take.
Are you sure, Kevin?
That's correct.
Yours in good standing?
Yeah, no joke. We don't joke about those things around this table.
Okay.
But the point is, it does matter. I think people think it's no big deal. And you mentioned Bill Clinton because he can make $500,000 a speech, and he's never going to practice law. But it should matter. I don't know if it matters to someone like Pam Bondi or not, but to see Pirro go down, to me, I have no sympathy for her. And by the way, the Department of Interior head threw the person under the bus who made the conclusion that this was a defective construction of the pool. By the way, was overcharged because it was a no bid contract. So the ultimate fault of this is with Trump, who threw out to no bid these hackers to come in and did a lousy job, and yet let's indict Joe Schmo over here, this poor Olympian canoeist.
They took his phone. They took the poor guy's phone. I mean, they held him for hours without telling him why, and, disrupted his life, made him pay for lots of attorneys and deal with the press, and here, what has he done for the country? He's a 3-time Olympian.
And was he carrying any tools that he could have used to cut up the liner, or were there any found within throwing distance of where he was pinched? Of course not. The whole thing's a scam.
Well,
and yet the president keeps insisting that we have indisputable video evidence. Well, look, it's almost 38 minutes past the hour. We're going to pause for a quick break. You're listening to the Voice of Reason here on the Tan Talk Radio Network. I'm your host, Ed Golly. My two co-hosts are Kevin Carey and Tom Skerritt. And when we come back, we'll talk a little bit about what's going on in Iran and the Trump economy, and how did Trump betray Saudi Arabia? All that, along with more of the issues that conservatives never want you to hear about.
Are you a writer, inventor? Do you have questions about your intellectual property rights? Well, tune in every Tuesday and Thursday morning at 11 o'clock for Joy on Paper. Once a month, I will have a special guest, the writer's legal eagle, Bill Larson of Larson & Larson, who can answer your questions. Protect your valuable work. Email me your questions to patsy.radio@gmail.com, and then listen in every Tuesday and Thursday at 11 a.m. right here on Tampa Bay's Tan Talk Radio Network. That's patsy.radio@gmail.com.
And now it's time for the Only a Conservative Could Think It Minute with your host, Ed Golly.
President Trump continues to prove he is an innovator in the field of corruption. The Trump-owned social media platform Truth Social will begin to sell subscriptions for faster access to his posts, costing $100,000 per month, and they're being marketed to large trading firms. Truth Social is a crappy, buggy service that hemorrhages money, but Trump has made the company valuable by making it the exclusive platform for his posts. He has recognized that the president has vast power to manipulate markets, and he can monetize this in numerous ways. One, by buying and selling stocks of companies impacted by his policies. Another, selling access to what he's going to say. Imagine if you had early access to Trump's April 9th, 2025 post pausing global tariffs. How valuable would that have been? Well, if you bought Apple stock that morning and sold it that afternoon, you'd have made a 15.3% profit. And that's why banks, funds, and every finance operation would gladly pay for early access to his feed. In fact, if you don't, you become the dumb money. It's why Trump is like Thomas Edison, Ray Kroc, and Henry Ford all rolled into one, but for government corruption. Think about that.
Don't turn it off now. You need this stuff. Tampa Bay's Tan Talk Radio Network.
It's time for Poll Watch now on the Voice of Reason. Recent August 2026 data shows deeply negative public sentiment on the American economy, with 60% to 63% of Americans disapproving of crooked Donald's economic management. Merely 28% of American adults currently rate national economic conditions as good. And according to a Fox News poll, 54% of registered voters expect conditions to worsen over the next year. Well, wouldn't you know that one of those 28% of Americans who thinks the economy is so good happens to be Donald Trump himself. Now, during an interview this week by a Fox program host, it was pointed out to Trump that the stock markets are at an all-time high. Oil was $75 a barrel today, but in the high 60s before the war started. And yet gasoline prices are still 30% higher than before the Iran war. Let's listen to the president's response when he was in Las Vegas the other day.
I think we're going to have it coming down. The oil companies have to start going. They're making too much money, and they've got to start lowering it. But we're going to be down into the 3s and maybe the 2s pretty soon per gallon. We'll see what happens with the war. We have a very good day today. They don't like to say that. The Iranians, they always like to say, we didn't discuss that. We didn't. People have found out that's not true. They had an all-day negotiation today, and it looks like things are very good. And if that happens where the Strait is opened up, they'll never have a nuclear weapon. But if the Strait opens up, and it's partially opened anyway, and as you know, we control the Strait totally through the blockade. But if we have no friction, then oil will go down to, I think it'll go down to $2.50 a gallon, $2.50. It was down to 185 before I had to make this little journey to the Islamic Republic of Iran. I had to make it. We had the best numbers that anybody's ever seen. But now you take a look with that going on. You just hit to get today. I think it's number 79 days. We hit an all-time stock market high.
Yep.
401ks are the highest they've ever been by double and triple.
Yep.
And then I read where we're doing badly on the economy. By the way, job numbers. We have more people working in the United States today than ever in history. We're doing an unbelievable job. Costs are coming way down. I inherited, they talk about costs. I inherited very, very high costs, and they're all coming down now. The food, the groceries, it's all coming down. We've done a great job. I think we should be given an A+ on the economy, but I think that's coming. People are starting to talk about it.
Well, let's take that apart a little bit, gentlemen. He says, to begin with, he says gasoline will be down to $2.50 a gallon. Okay, it's always what's coming, what's just over the horizon, and that's why he should get such a high
Well, I
rate.
can tell you, I just bought gas 10 minutes ago. It was $4.05 currently.
The other interesting thing, he said, is that he claims that we, the United States, totally controls the Strait of Hormuz. Well, if that's the case, why don't we open it?
The fact is we don't control it. Otherwise, we'd open it, right? He's just delusional. Now, he claims that gasoline was $1.85 before the war. We just heard him say that. The lowest national average price of regular retail gasoline in the United States over the past 2 years, so this is going back to August of 2024, was $2.81 a gallon, recorded in January 2026. That's a whole $1 a gallon higher than what he claims it was. I don't know if he's an idiot or he just thinks we're all idiots and will believe anything he says.
But Ed, as Tom said a minute ago, the man is delusional. First of all,
or he thinks we just don't know. We
thank
just
God he doesn't
believe anything he says.
Or both.
Yeah.
Well, and I say that at a serious psychological level. I don't mean that as a criticism just of not liking his politics or whatnot. But I want to add another point here. As a parent and grandparent, I know, Tom, you are as well, as you are, Ed, that there's a saying in parenting that your children don't expect you to solve their problems, but they expect you to give a damn about their problems and feel the pain. Trump does not give a damn about the issues that bother most of the people in this country. He says it's a hoax. He says this affordability issue is a hoax. When he says, it finally struck me this morning, I heard a commentator say this on the drive down. He says just what he said, everything is wonderful. You know why he says that? Because that's all his buddies. If you're a billionaire and a millionaire, it is going great. Yeah. He doesn't ever talk to anybody that's feeling the pain. They don't have any access to him. So everyone and all his cabinet members kiss his ass. So he's in this bubble, Tom, where he does believe that everything's great. Because if you're rich, it is all very good.
I am reminded of something Ed said either beforehand in our preparation, that Trump has promised settlement over 8 times now. He promised it again yesterday. I think that's number 9. And that we won't allow Iran to control the Strait of Hormuz. And then he says we control it. I mean, it goes back and forth. But we put Iran in control. They were not in control until we started this, absolutely, ridiculous war. And we put them in a very powerful and lucrative position, right? We talked about this on one of the other shows. It's kind of like a Netflix subscription. You want to go through, the Strait of Hormuz, you got to pay so much to get through. And now they are negotiating not with the United States, but with Oman. And they're talking about a deal where one will pick the pockets of these ships coming through at the beginning, and the other one will pick the pockets at the end. So you're going to get 2 subscription charges. And they will decide who gets to go through. I mean, they control the strait. I thought it was mines. But I read further, and it's cheap rockets and drones, and they're not firing them at ships, right? They're there, and they are very effective without ever being used because they scare the insurance companies, and that's how they're doing it. Smart, you get to save your powder and keep the ships from coming in. That if the insurance companies won't cover these ships, they're not going in there. So it's a forever war. Okay, that is like the thing that Trump wants to stay away from, is referring to this as a forever war. He can't get out. It's a box. He has created this box and he cannot get out.
Well, the irony is that's what he criticized his predecessors, saying we're never going to have these forever wars, he called it, in the Mideast with Iraq and Afghanistan. He does exactly the opposite of what he complains about. For example, by the way, he's at odds with Hegseth now. When you're a dysfunctional sociopath as Trump is, you get at odds with your cabinet very quickly. We've talked already about he's at odds with Jeanine Pirro, who's the U.S. attorney in D.C. He's been at odds with the attorney general, Pam Bondi, who he fired, Kristi Noem, who he fired. Pete Hegseth, he's mad at now because he's one of the big issues has been that our munitions are way down. And he denies that. Hegseth has acknowledged that, and Trump comes out, oh, that's not true, just like he talks about Pierre. Oh, that's, she caved, she choked. He's mad at Hegseth now for saying the truth. It's like you can't tell the truth to this man because he doesn't want to hear it.
The fact is that Iran will never settle. Why would they?
They have no motivation.
No motivation. They're making money hand over fist. They love thumbing their noses at the United States. They hate Trump. They have a fatwa, if I'm saying it right, to kill him. And why would they take the word of a guy whose promises are worthless? Why would you ever do that? So he has guaranteed that they will never settle. And the only way he's going to settle, and here is a prediction. You heard it right here on WTAN. He will declare victory and make up something and leave with his tail between his legs and declare that it was a fantastic result. And that is what's going to happen. Now, it may not happen for, days, weeks, months. I mean, this could go on forever as long as, he's unrestrained. And that's why, again, we're hoping in November that there'll be some restraint. There'll be some pressure. But if not, it could go on for years.
Well, Tom, and I'd be perfectly happy with that result, because I don't care what, his bloviating comments. I don't care what Trump says, because he never knows reality. But he needs to get the hell out of there, because we're spending way too much money. People are dying. They lie about the death count. They lie about the injury count. He's got no strategy here, and at some point he's going to have to get out. And again, what he claimed in his mind about being victory, we're losing that war. It's a laughing stock right now, but people are dying, and it's affecting our ability to, in terms of our Department of Defense in other areas of the world, which he just denies. He denies these fundamental facts to our detriment.
Do you know just one thing? Do you know how much it costs for the Iranians to make a missile that they use?
Is it $20,000?
$30,000. You know how much it costs for us to use our, Mac Daddy missiles? Millions. Okay, you don't have to be a math genius to figure out that the one side's going to run out of the allegedly superior weapon, and the other side's just going to keep making them.
And let me add to that. And Ukraine learned that. Iran learned that from Ukraine, because Ukraine is doing the same thing with Russia, and Ukraine offered to assist us with that. And Trump said, "Oh, we don't need any help. We're just going to keep throwing out these expensive munitions."
And it also demonstrates the cost of selecting cabinet members like Whiskey Pete out of Central Casting instead of a general that has been in the Pentagon for 30 years and actually knows how to conduct warfare in the first place. Notice we don't hear anything from him anymore. He's back to the bar, probably. That's where I'd be if I was him. And he may get sacked pretty soon, but he doesn't know what the hell he's doing. And it's a tremendous price we're paying for that guy's incompetence.
Well, these are all microcosms of bigger issues, and that issue there, and it is the case with Hegseth, is he has no cabinet members who are anything other than kissing his ass, and you need cabinet members that will speak the truth. And he's in this bubble where nobody speaks the truth. We might as well be in North Korea. You see these cabinet meetings that go on for 4 hours, and all just kissing the guy's ass to our major detriment. And I pray and hope, Tom, that in November we can see some accountability with at least one or both houses, because this can't continue. This economy is a wreck. We're in a war that has no end in sight. We've got scandal after scandal. We've got just corruption like we've never seen before. We don't say these things lightly. This is the most corrupt administration in the history of this country, period.
I think is more corrupt than all the rest of them combined, going back to Boss Tweed and the Tammany Hall mob and all of them. I mean, it's unbelievable. Now, he says the stock market's at an all-time high, and that's true. It keeps going up, which it did all through the previous administration. It didn't plunge and then come back when he was elected. It's steadily going up. But who's that benefiting? His billionaire buddies. The 60% of Americans working paycheck to paycheck don't have generous stock portfolios that is helping them to realize a bonanza here. He did say correctly that more people are working than ever in history, but that's because we have a higher population than we've ever had in history. What's important in that case is the unemployment rate, which is still standing at 4.2%. Anything under 5 is considered full employment, but the number really isn't moving. It only came down 0.1% since the previous quarter. So he's not putting millions of Americans back to work. He says prices are coming down. That's because he doesn't ever buy anything. Think about it. His housing, his transportation, his health care, his food, everything that guy uses in life is paid for by the taxpayer. How the hell does he know what prices are like? He's never pushed a grocery cart through a shopping center in his whole life and doesn't understand that for most people, it's getting challenging. They're cutting back to 2 meals a day. They're really having to watch every dollar they spend and going deeper in debt. Well, he turns around and says the economy's an A+. Well, that's kind of nice when you can grade your own paper, isn't it?
Well, one of the turning points when the first George Bush lost to Bill Clinton in 1992 was someone asked Bush how much milk cost. And he did. And Bush, by the way, is 10 times the president of this corrupt
But
clown.
how would he know? He doesn't go shopping.
Well, that's my point.
Yeah.
But it made Bush appear to be out of touch when Clinton's theme, as you remember in 92, was "I feel your pain." Remember that the joke was that Clinton was the first African-American president because he did convey to minorities that he did care about them. And there's going to be a reckoning in November. I think the only concern I have is this, these charades, the redistricting illegally, in fact, in Florida, in complete violation of the amended state constitution, Tom, as we've, I think, talked about before. But no one seems to care about this. I mean, that's the sad part is people don't seem to care about this lawlessness, and they don't seem to care that there's a law that says this or there's a court order that says that. One of the problems with Blanche, just for a second, is that he ignores court orders, and that's what his boss demands. Doesn't ask, he demands loyalty. The law be damned.
And our governor does the same thing. I mean,
absolutely.
Although you don't hear much from him anymore. He's kind of faded because he's a lame ducker, but he's still out there fighting, trying to get the property tax done away with, which, everybody would love to hear that their taxes are going down, but what they don't like to hear is when they call 911 and the ambulance says, I'm sorry, but do you have a credit card? You have to prepay our ride out there. And that's not what our governor is saying at all.
No, but now that situation is going to apply to blue states altogether, because the New York Times reported last week that the Trump administration admitted to canceling billions of dollars in grants out of vengeance against those states. The White House eliminated over $7.5 billion in clean energy grants in October. Officials claimed they were simply trying to keep taxpayer money from going to waste, but that wasn't true because in a little-known July court filing, an Energy Department official acknowledged cutting 284 grants based solely on politics. So if you're in a blue state like up in isn't it Washington or Oregon where they're having all those fires, he's just going to say, well, if you didn't vote for me, you don't get that money that you contributed to the U.S. Treasury to help you out of this jam.
And he did the same thing to the Ivy League schools. He said, I'm going to withhold $500 million, and I'm also going to make your life miserable unless you capitulate. And Princeton was one of the first ones that capitulated. And law firms have done the same thing. And, the reasoning is this guy's, he's dangerous. And we can't afford the type of punishments that he will inflict upon us. And then Trump, one of the things I would never say I liked anything about him, but that I appreciate is that he cannot keep a thought back. What he's thinking because he's incapable. He has, absolutely no filter. And what he said was, I cannot believe how easily they came to the table and said, we'll do whatever you want. And the interesting thing, going back to your point, Kevin, is that about the respect for the rule of law, is that he didn't have the authority to nullify a lot of these grants. They were not within his ambit of authority directly. But he got to do it because the people who were in authority were yes men and yes women. And they were afraid that if they didn't do what he said, they'd be replaced. And they were right.
Ed, for better or for worse, you surround yourself with attorneys. You usually have two attorneys around you at these, I think for better, but for better for worse. And Tom alluded to this earlier. Most law school exams, what they do, they throw out a fact pattern and they say, discuss all the issues. You have 3 hours and just have at it. It's not multiple choice. And so when you look at Trump's pattern of conduct, we could spend hours on this. One we haven't talked about, which is also just horribly wrong, is he's demanded the voting rolls from these various states when court after court after court has says that he's had no right to do that. And yet he's going to penalize you and not give that state that benefit, the FEMA benefits, other benefits, unless you turn over these voter rolls, which the court has expressly said you do not have to do. Does that bother any of these MAGA Republicans? It should. I mean, this is not about politics. So we could go on, Tom and I, we could spend 9 hours with you saying what problems we have objectively. And again, this is not about politics, but this democracy is based upon a rule of law, which we do. This president does not want to follow.
Well, it's time for us to break for national and international news. Back with the second hour of The Voice of Reason, we'll be looking at a perfectly legal way to steal the midterm elections. Ed Golly with Kevin Carey and Tom Skerritt inviting you to stay with us here on the Tan Talk Radio Network, where The Voice of Reason will return in just a few minutes with more of the issues that conservatives never want you to hear about.
WTAN, Clearwater,
FM 106.1,
WDCF, Dade City,
FM 102.3.
Listen.
Dr. Anthony Fauci may face prosecution. I'm Dave Anthony. After a Senate committee voted a short time ago to hold the ex-presidential COVID advisor in contempt of Congress.
On behalf of the millions of people harmed by Anthony Fauci, resoundingly yes.
Senator Bernie Moreno and other committee Republicans approved the resolution a week after Dr. Fauci refused to answer any questions at a COVID hearing. GOP Senator Ron Johnson said before the vote,
"It's been 6 years since the pandemic began. We have not had a reckoning of what happened."
The committee plans to refer the case to the Justice Department to consider charging Fauci. Democrats were outvoted and called this political theater. Senator Richard Blumenthal says the doctor was right to not testify after claiming Republicans were out to get him.
There is virtually no chance that a court would actually approve any contempt because he had a well-founded fear of self-incrimination, which entitled him to invoke the Fifth Amendment.
We just got a statement from Fauci's lawyer calling the vote a crude political stunt intended to punish the doctor who has committed no crime and in 50 years of public health saved countless lives. Iran and Oman are said to be close to a deal on the Strait of Hormuz, which President Trump keeps demanding be open fully with no more attacks on ships. He is also pushing back on reports as he pauses attacks on Iran. The U.S. is low on weapons.
The president says the U.S. has massive amounts of munitions and adds in an overnight social media post, large amounts are being manufactured and shipped to the U.S. as needed. He accuses what he calls leakers of treasonous statements and is threatening long-term jail sentences. Top White House and Pentagon officials are also pushing back on reports that President Trump demanded answers from Secretary Pete Hegseth last week about extreme munitions shortages.
That's Fox's Jared Halpern at the White House. America's listening to Fox News.
Fox News Books has boasted a host of bestsellers. Now, Fox News Books enters the world of podcasting. This season, the Fox News Books podcast presents The Miracles Among Us. For its first season, Fox News Books will present this special podcast brought to you by the author, Fox News senior medical analyst, Dr. Mark Siegel. The Miracles Among Us on the Fox News Books podcast. Listen and follow now at foxnewspodcasts.com or wherever you download podcasts.
Hello, everyone. This is Ainsley Earhart. Thank you for joining me for the 52-episode podcast series, The Life of Jesus.
Neil McDonough portrays Jesus. Stacey Keach, Sean Astin, Michael York, and Kristen Bell provide the voices for some of Jesus's notable followers. A listening experience that will provide hope, comfort, and understanding of the greatest story ever told, the life of Jesus.
Make sure to spread the word.
Listen and follow now at foxnewspodcasts.com or wherever you listen to podcasts.
This is Downtown Dave. How would you like to be able to promote yourself, your business, or someone else's business for less than the cost of one 60-second commercial on many Tampa Bay radio stations? Here's the deal. You can have your own 1-hour radio program on the Tan Talk Network for less than the cost of one 60-second announcement on many Tampa Bay stations. Your program will be on 2 Tampa Bay radio stations and will cover 4 million people in Florida, plus worldwide on the internet in both audio and video. And you'll have a web link for your business on the Tan Talk 1340 website. We provide the producer, the state-of-the-art equipment, pre-production of commercials, and much more. Check it out today. Call Lola O'Brien, the Irish Hawaiian, at 727-510-7622. That's 510-7622. Call Lola O'Brien now, 727-510-7622. Call now and your 1-hour radio program can start tomorrow. Call 510-7622 for Lola O'Brien, the Irish Hawaiian, at the Tan Talk Radio Network.
Tune in to the Shrink and Wrap Show, here radio. Our stories and our topics will include, but are not limited to, everyday issues. We're here for you, for our listeners. We want to know what's important to you. So again, don't miss us on Tan Talk Radio. Tune in again, Shrink and Wrap Show. We'll see you then.
The Shrink and Wrap Show at its new time, Thursdays from 4 to 5 p.m. here on the Tan Talk Radio Network.
Hi, I'm Dawn Reese with the Dawn Reese Show, most powerful names in entertainment, every Thursday at 5 p.m. I have so many different segments I'm so excited to share with you, from miracle stories to celebrity interviews with Hollywood connections to travel to local business, promoting your business on the air with me, an amazing opportunity to grow your business. Tune in to the Tan Talk Radio Network, 106.1 FM on Thursdays, 5 p.m. with me, Dawn Reese.
Hey everyone, it is Brandy Joy with the Brandy Joy Joyride. Feel free to hop in and have a good time with us every Thursday from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. This show is brought to you by One Unit, dedicated to bringing people together, letting your voices be heard, and of course we're here to entertain you, upbuild you, inspire you, and even hear from you. So every Thursday, tune in to 106.1 FM, Brandy Joy Joyride, and we will hear from you and let's have some fun.
Don't turn it off now. You need this stuff. Tampa Bay's Tan Talk Radio Network.
Now, the voice of reason continues here on the Tan Talk Radio Network. Here again is your host for today's program, Ed Golly.
And with me in the Tan Talk studio, my co-hosts are attorney Tom Skerritt and attorney and former circuit judge Kevin Carey. Could Donald Trump and Republicans exploit a legal loophole to steal the midterm elections? Well, unfortunately, the answer is yes. Let's look at the United States Constitution. Article 1, Section 5 says this, quote, "Each house shall be the judge of the elections, returns, and qualifications of its own members," unquote. Now, what that means is that the House and the Senate decide who is seated in their respective chambers, and ominously, those decisions are not reviewable by any other branch of government, including the courts. Let that sink in, because that's the means that we've been trying to protect ourselves from all the mismanagement of government under the Trump administration, and it would not be applicable here. So under election law, losing House candidates can contest their defeats, and the Republican majority can decide by a simple vote to seat them, even if their challenge lacks evidence of fraud or error. Trump has created multiple pretexts to declare Democratic victories in November invalid, and when he inevitably does, House Speaker Mike Johnson and other Republican leaders won't defy him in the way that Vice President Mike Pence did in 2020. And I got to admit, as much contempt as I have for Pence and all of his policies, he did do the right thing. And he didn't throw the election over for Trump. He followed the Constitution, which was what he was supposed to do. Now, if you think such a scenario is too far-fetched to be real, it actually happened several times in American history, including in 1931, when House Democrats reversed a Republican's narrow victory. If control of the House comes down to a few seats, we should be under no illusions about MAGA's intentions.
Ed, like you pointed out, Section 5 does allow the House to be the judge of the elections. And that's been interpreted to mean election fraud. Now, the scary part is they can make a determination that there might have been election fraud, just like Trump did, even though 50 judges said that there wasn't any. And then they could conceivably have some sort of hearing. And if there is no evidence of election fraud, they can say, too bad, and, like Ed said, there's no review of it. I think that this would, constitute what you'd have as a constitutional crisis.
Clearly. Oh, yeah.
And I think you told me, Ed, that, we could lose the republic over this. I mean, it's the most serious, result that we could have from these elections. And I'm not quite, I've scratched my head and said, well, what can we do to prevent this? And I'm at a loss.
Well, I think, as we've said many times already today, Trump is in this delusional silo. So I don't know what reality he perceives, but I think even he probably understands, as most Republicans, they can read the polls, which are horrible right now. We've talked about that over the last few months. For example, the poll that says that the Democrats have an 11-point edge on those who are highly motivated to vote because we're angry and people are doing very poorly. The economy's a mess. As we mentioned, this president doesn't even seem to care about that, let alone try and solve the problem. And so I think there's a sense that anything could happen to keep power. And I believe these sycophants who've supported Trump quietly and not wanted to get it on his bad side, I think would pretty much do anything. We've talked about how Jeanine Pirro, as U.S. attorney, went to a grand jury improperly without the facts. So I believe these people would do anything. The part about that does bother me, as you mentioned too, Tom, is that it's apparently not reviewable by a court. We always feel like, and as a former judge and as lawyers, that there's the court system to protect us. And you've mentioned, I think correctly, several times over the past few months, Tom, that the federal district judges have been the one bastion to push back against this authoritarian tyranny is what it is. But the fact is that this is not reviewable. I have some, not concern, I've got some hope that the fact this hasn't been used in almost 100 years, I think you're right. I think there would be a constitutional crisis because, Democrats, we would not just, stand by and let this happen. And you mentioned last week, and I agree with you on this point too, the bigger the victory, the less this can happen. Right. So we just need to win big so this can't happen.
Well, in Albania, I know you've heard of this, hundreds of thousands of Albanians are pouring in the streets every day, and they've been doing this for the past 2 months to express their vehement rejection of Trumpism, and it's called the Flamingo Revolution. That was sparked when pro-Trump Prime Minister Edi Rama and his oligarch allies gave Ivanka Trump, Jared Kushner, and the couple's Saudi and Qatari partners approval to develop that ultra-luxurious resort on a large public island called Cezanne. So Europeans are a little bit puzzled that the Americans aren't standing up more forcefully to Trump's grotesque corruption, his self-serving alliance with tech oligarchs and crypto crooks, and his ethnic cleansing campaign, his state-sanctioned brutality, his assaults on free speech, elections, science, and the rule of law. So even pro-American Europeans are questioning, why aren't people in the United States in the streets every day? Which is a good question, because even though Trump is not a dictator, there's no doubt he aspires to be one. And it's ironic that the conservatives claim that the Democrats are nothing short of complete communists. And yet in every communist country we look at in the world, we can name about 6 of them, right? Russia, Cuba, North Korea, China, Vietnam, well, I don't know what else. There's another one there somewhere. But they're all run by dictators, right? One party system, one guy rules everything. And that's exactly what Trump is trying to turn our country into. So these flagrant abuses of power that he's exercising should be disqualifying, or would be in any other part of U.S. history. And we may be actually facing the greatest constitutional crisis in the history of this country, depending on what happens in November, because I would assert that Trump is desperate to keep a majority in the House and the Senate of Republicans so that he can continue to operate without any controls over the crimes that he commits against this country, which are just rampant.
Well, just briefly too, you mentioned the Senate races. The parties have to defend certain seats. The Democrats have to defend in Georgia, but that seat now I think is a fairly strong. John Ossoff I think is going to keep that seat. New Hampshire I think is going to stay that way. You got Michigan. We talked a little bit about Michigan. We're going to talk about it a little later about that is the other state Senate seat that needs to be defended. And then of course the Democrats need to pick up net 4. And we're looking at Maine, North Carolina, Texas, Alaska, Iowa, and Ohio. I didn't mention Ohio. So the Senate races are always very, very important. As you know, one of the most important aspects of that, as Tom knows, Ed, is the Senate has to approve the nominations, the cabinet nominations, and probably more importantly, or as importantly, the judicial nominations, not just the Supreme Court, but to the lower federal courts and the courts of appeals. And that's where I think the Senate's very, very important that we have a rein in on this president.
Yeah, and we've been talking about the economy. Trump rates himself so well on it, but foreclosures, it turns out, have increased 26% from a year ago, with approximately 119,000 homes entering foreclosure just during the first quarter of this year. And that represents the largest increase since the COVID-19 pandemic, when the government stimulus programs helped a lot of homeowners stay current on housing costs.
Do you remember in 2008, Ed, there was a serious economic problem with foreclosures?
Yeah.
When I was a circuit judge then, I would have foreclosure cases, and literally I'd have a docket for foreclosure docket, and then my judicial assistant would bring the files in, and for the foreclosure files, they'd literally be up to the ceiling. I mean, it would be just kind of running through. You could have a whole division just be foreclosures. And I think we may see that coming again because of the inability of people to pay the rent, pay the mortgage. In addition to the point we made last week, which is you've got these institutions that are buying up these houses, not people living there. That's one of the issues that should be addressed, has been addressed by this bipartisan housing bill that Trump did not like. He didn't veto it, but he didn't sign it, but it went into law without him signing it. But these are, again, there are common themes here, Ed and Tom, which is Trump just doesn't care about the things that people are facing. And when he says everything is great and this person can't go to the doctor, is losing Medicaid, the nursing home is closing down. And by the way, all the temporary residents that are helping grandma in the nursing home are being deported on their way to work. Mm-hmm. So I mean, everywhere you turn, nothing is happening that's helping that person. And as you said earlier, the stock market doesn't affect the common man. He's not looking at his stock every day in the paper.
But if this actually happens in November, where Democrats win by a few thousand votes, let's say Tallarico in Texas wins that Senate seat, and then Trump comes along and says, well, okay, he won by 180,000 votes, but there were 300,000 illegal votes cast by illegal aliens. Therefore, we're going to put Paxton in that seat.
Well, the hope that we have is that we would see a repeat of what happened in that exact case, where Trump made these claims and hired these lawyers to press the claims that there was fraud. And there were 50 judges, I keep repeating this, including a lot of Trump judges, who said there's no credible evidence of that. And they would not allow for any election result to be overturned. Now, maybe it's worse now. Knock on wood.
Isn't that the point of what we were just talking about, of what's in the Constitution, is that the majority Republicans can just say, it doesn't matter what the court says. We believe there was fraud, that Paxton should be put in that Senate seat, and we vote for it by 51 to 49, and that's the end of that. He becomes the senator from Texas, even though he lost the election. Because you can't gerrymander a Senate election.
Yeah, and I just would hope that might be the straw that broke the camel's back. That people say, our vote is worthless. Why did we vote? because when we vote, even if we win, if our candidate wins by little or a lot, they're going to overturn it. You know, I would hope that people would say enough. We're just not going to allow you to take our vote.
And you both have alluded to the fact that it's true. There's so much bad that goes on. It's hard to focus on any one thing. For example, in this context, the Supreme Court pretty much threw out the Voting Rights Act, and as pretty much bleached these elections where minorities are not getting the opportunity. And Trump, life is, I'm convinced the most important dynamic in life is irony. This Supreme Court has done nothing but kiss this guy's ass, including saying any criminal conduct you do is okay with us. Did you hear what he said the other day? He was complaining and criticizing the Supreme Court. And he said specifically the opinion in the birthright case and the tariff case, which were both opinions that were expressly supported by the language of the Constitution. They should have both been 9-0 when they weren't 9-0. But he complained about that, and he said incorrectly, by the way, which he always does. His quote was, "That's going to cost us trillions and trillions of dollars, those two horrible rulings." So you can't pacify a bully. You can't. And any attempt to try and pacify him is a major mistake.
So Justice Gorsuch was one of his picks, right? And got him on. He wasn't as controversial as the others, but he had the audacity to make a statement in public about the fact that he and the other members of the court owe their allegiance, owe their duty to the Constitution and not to any person or any other organization. And Trump crucified him, said, how dare you, cite the Constitution to me? I mean, it's
goes
chilling.
back to James Comey.
Yeah, to Comey, exactly.
Started right there.
And, Judge, is it Barrett?
Coney Barrett, yes.
She was testifying before Congress about the need to up the ante on the security for the justices, because she has to go out, and when she goes out in public to the grocery store, she has to wear a bulletproof vest, and my thought was, well, maybe you should have thought about that when you neutered all the gun control laws. But, there's nobody, there was a picture of her when he came in for the State of the Union, and she looked terrified, honestly, because she knows that the guy's a bully and that he's, like you say, you can't satisfy him unless you do everything he says. And even then you're going to dig that, that Bondi hole so deep that you'll never be able to get out. And you're the one that's going to be sacrificed.
Well, he even suggested that he would like to have the capacity to fire these Supreme Court justices. I mean, he knows he can't legally do it, but that's where he's going with this. I want total control of the courts. I'm the communist, really.
Ed, when I was on the bench, I ruled in a case, and Tom, who's been a good friend for many, many years, I ruled against an attorney whose name I won't mention on the air, but he went to Tom and said, "I can't believe all I did for Judge Kerry's reelection campaign, and he ruled against me." Can you believe that?
Oh, he was
and
furious.
Honestly,
furious.
Wow. That I was just incompetent. And that is how Trump feels. If I point you to the bench, you're my judge. And that's why, you remember, he talked about Obama judges and Trump judges, and the Chief Justice came out at the time. Even that was too much for Roberts to stay quiet. And he said, you might remember this, he gave a speech in Houston saying, there are no Trump judges, there are no Obama judges. There are judges who, as you mentioned, Tom, owe a duty to the Constitution. Maybe need to remind the senators of that as well, that they've all taken an oath of office. This isn't North Korea. This isn't Hungary. This isn't Russia. You don't take an oath to an individual. You take it to the Constitution.
Well, having decided to make an honest living in my life, I'm not a lawyer, but I wonder, it seems to me, looking in from the outside, that these federal judges are the guys or women that really have the most integrity on the bench. Now, can you tell me if there's any truth to that or reason for it? Or is that just my imagination?
Well, number one was, there, as Tom knows, unlike state judges that we have to run for re-election in Florida every 6 years, it's a lifetime appointment, which was controversial. That people, that's the case, and people assume that the law is the law. But many people have said you can't give someone a lifetime appointment. But the point of that was to get you away from this loyalty toward any one individual.
Mm-hmm.
So on a time when
no, that's true.
That?
I mean, that's the theory. That's not the practice. And there is a proposal that's being bandied about in the Senate to install 18-year terms. I think that's a great idea. You would stagger these terms so that the justices would roll off after their 18 years, and you wouldn't have these little fiefdoms, because that's what you have. And then when the fiefdoms, I mean, it's just like the Middle Ages, when the fiefdoms get together and they say, okay, we can combine our armies and we can go and attack this, this area. And that's exactly what's going on. And, now they got a fiefdom of 5, at least,
really
sometimes 6. And, and I hate to use the term liberals, because a good justice doesn't care about, a political agenda. A good judge just looks at the case, looks at the facts, looks at the law, and makes a decision based on those two things. I mean, Kevin, you did that for 6 years, 7 years, and I was the head of the Florida Commission on Ethics. Okay, and that body it was very interesting the way it was appointed. 3 appointees from the House leader, 3 from the Senate leader, and 3 from the governor. But they had to be equally divided between Democrats and Republicans. Okay. And when I became the chair, the other Democrats came to me and said, we're really afraid of you because you rule more for the Republicans for the Democrats. Because I didn't, but I mean, that's what they said. And I said, well, I don't rule for anybody. I rule based on the law and the facts. Yeah. And if it happens to fall this way or that way, and that's what the great judges do. I mean, we've had some superb judges growing up as young lawyers, just beacons of integrity. And so a lot of them, I never even knew what their political affiliation was. Didn't matter. And that's what we have to get back to.
One of the things that when I was a circuit judge, one of the things that was easier than I thought it was going to be would be rule against lawyers I knew, because when you get elected to become a judge, you know most of the lawyers because you have to get elected. You need contributions. You need to go to the bar association. But I found that easier than I thought. I found other things harder. For example, terminating parental rights when you've got children abused. That to me was a very difficult part of the job when you were in the dependency child abuse area. But you're right. I mean, you'd like to think that most judges in any capacity, as you said, Tom, when you chaired the Ethics Commission, look at the facts, the law, and try and be objective. And that's kind of gone out the window with Trump.
With one exception, and again, I go back to the federal bench, the trial bench, not the appellate bench and the Supreme Court have been compromised. I mean, the U.S. Supreme Court has the lowest confidence rating than in the history of the country. And there's a good reason for it. I mean, they basically... they come up with these theories called originalist and all this, which quite frankly, logically doesn't make a lot of sense, but it gives them the right to take any issue and just do whatever they want with it. Even though we were built on this theory of stare decisis, which is to respect the previous rulings of judges over hundreds of years, they just do away with them, whether it's on abortion, whether it's on voting rights, they just, they don't care, they really don't care. And so they're not much help. Matter of fact, they're a big part of the problem, but the federal district courts have repeatedly stepped in. I'm so proud of them, but I'm also so relieved that they're there. And, the other folks, I think, the military, I thought would be more stout in their refusal to obey illegal orders. Haven't seen much of that, but and hope we don't go so far where they have to invoke that. But I understand the pressure that they're under. Think about it. This guy's your boss. Who's going to be the first one to say, I'm not doing that? What will happen to him? I mean, what's going to happen to them? They'll be gone. They'll be thrown out. Just like that. And then the last group that I always point to is we got to have some leaders, some political leaders somewhere, right? Somebody's got to stand up. Massey, I'm sorry, love the guy, I just love that guy. He's not only standing up, but he's having a good time doing it, and I think that we'll see more of these leaders emerge as the cracks in the wall get bigger and bigger.
Well, Massey got primaried and lost.
Of course.
So he's, but at least he's going out with his boots on, unlike some of his others that got primaried and lost that seem to be, still kissing Trump's patootie. Massey is doing what he thinks is right. And you do have to respect that.
Well, truth be told, I never could have made it through law school. In fact, I barely made it through Trump University, which explains why I'm living in a single wide today. But speaking of lawsuits, did you guys hear that a coalition of 25 states in this country is suing the Trump administration, arguing that his latest round of tariffs on over 80 countries exceed his legal authority? And it goes right back to what you've been talking about. He just has complete contempt for the law and assumes it doesn't apply to him, and he always tries to find a way around it. He's never had the authority to levy tariffs in the first place. It's clearly outlined in the Constitution as the prerogative only of Congress, and yet he just goes right ahead and does it, and they don't stand up to him.
He does it because the law doesn't apply to him, like Ed said, but B, he uses his best tactic, and I have to say it's working, is delay. He's gonna litigate it at every step of the way, and he's going to try to slow walk everything, and in the meantime he gets to operate the way he wants to. Now the tariff thing was pretty, that even the Supreme Court couldn't swallow that one, and so he said no problem, and he goes back and he changes the tariff. He changed the language under which they impose tariffs and the like, and then that has to be litigated, right? Every time I loved, representing cities. We represent a lot of cities. We'd pass legislation. They'd strike it. We change a couple of words, put it back in the system, and you can just do this as much as you want. And
you mentioned earlier too, you made a prediction earlier. I'll make a prediction here. This is equally as illegal. He just goes back to Stephen Miller, who thinks he's the smartest guy in the room, and let's come up with some other BS theory. As you've mentioned, we've talked about many times on this show, tariffs by Constitution, not by opinion, by Constitution, is something subject to the congressional branch of government, not the executive branch.
Stephen Miller sleeps hanging upside down in a bat cave, I think. Listen to this. California Attorney General Rob Bonta, who co-led the coalition, claimed Trump is, quote, so intent on raising the cost of living for Americans that he's willing to break law after law after law to do so. He says tariffs are taxes, and the American people cannot and should not shoulder the extra costs that come from the president's failed and illegal economic policy, no matter how much the president wants him to. Now, you can guess what states are not involved in this lawsuit, right? Florida, of course, yeah. Joining California are Arizona, New York, Colorado, Connecticut, Delaware, Kentucky, Hawaii, Illinois, Massachusetts, Michigan. There's a theme here, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, for many months, they
all have Democratic attorneys general, and that's why they're mixed up.
For many months, I never understood Trump's focus on tariffs. It certainly wasn't a campaign issue when he ran in 2024. And it is nothing but a sales tax. So it doesn't help the economy. It hasn't helped the economy. The economy is in the trash can right now. But what it gives him, and this is what he wants as a dictator, it gives him power over these countries. And he every day he's got something new, but that's the leverage he likes. And he doesn't care that the economy's gone to hell. He's going to care. Maybe he'll care when he gets his ass kicked, and that his party gets their asses kicked in November if there's not too much chicanery that goes on here and fraud with this. But the point is, I've wondered why he wants this, because it does not, by definition, help the economy. It's an additional sales tax, and the issue and the reason is it gives him power over these other countries.
Kevin, the other issue that's sort of a corollary is, where's the tariff money rebate going? Okay, it bothers me that Costco can sue the government. That doesn't bother me, but Costco can sue the government and say this tariff is legally insufficient or invalid. The Supreme Court agrees. He's got to pay back the money. Okay, so maybe it's 50 million, or maybe it's 100 million. Where does that money go? Do you think it goes into pockets of the consumers who paid it?
It's
No,
not.
It's not. It's going back to those companies. So they got a boon they got a benefit out of this deal. And that's
a very good point.
Yeah, no one seems to be talking about that. They paid it, and now they're not getting it. It's going to the companies.
And you're fully correct on that, Tom. And I blame the Supreme Court for that, because in their ruling they were not specific enough as to the remedy. And you're right. Ultimately, it is the taxpayers who are harmed, not the manufacturers or companies, because they're just passing it on as they did to the consumer. And as you said, it's a windfall to them, because they've already charged that amount to get it back.
And they're going to claim that they dropped their prices and they suffered this and suffered that. But
yeah, good luck with that.
Yeah, that's a lot of chicanery.
Well, here's what's so bizarre about it. Trump, on this new round of tariffs that he's levying against more than 80 countries, he's using a law provision that lets Washington punish countries that fail to take enough action against forced labor. He's never shown any concern for worker exploitation before. In fact, his administration chopped more than $500 million from the Labor Department's efforts to investigate and fight against forced labor, child labor, and human trafficking. So, he's just, he tells you that this is the vital concern of ours that he doesn't give a damn about. It's just a way of pushing this archaic idea he has that tariffs are going to somehow make our economy great, and it's not working.
But Ed, it never was going to do that. What it did is give him and he knows that, or someone told him that. What it did give him was leverage over these other countries, and they have now gotten on board and said, "We're tired of this bully. Go away. We'll deal with China. We're dealing with other countries." It's not working either, because so he's in a box.
We're really suffering from this in Canada. Canada, we used to be one of our biggest trade partners, and they're the nicest people in the world, generally speaking. They make fun about how many times they say sorry, because they're such nice folks. But they finally said, we've had enough. And they said, you have rare minerals that you need from us. Too bad. We're going to put 1,000% tariff on, this coming in. And they've turned back. The liquor industry is collapsing because they're not cooperating, giving us things. There people up there. I mean, we have friends that live up there, and they're just buying Canadian.
Well, I'm trying to do my part to make up the slack, but there's only so much I can. We've actually lost 75,000 manufacturing jobs since Trump's reelection. And over the same 2-year period when his predecessor was in office, we had created 625,000 jobs. So clearly this isn't working. He claims we're taking in something like $19.5 trillion in foreign investment. Where in the heck is all that going? Because when we have these tariffs on raw materials, a company that needs something like aluminum, for example, to manufacture something, doesn't know how much of a tariff they're going to need to pay to get that into the country. So it behooves them to build their factory in Canada or someplace where there's not a tariff so that they can plan their production costs. Whereas here it's so scatterbrained, it's not worth it to take the risk.
But Ed, nobody ever thought it was a good idea. The reason he did this by executive order, which was illegal per the Supreme Court, was that Congress, if this went to Congress in hearings, no one testified or would testify that this was a strong economic idea, because it's nothing more than a sales tax. So no one ever debated this issue in Congress. He just, like King, did it illegally. His Supreme Court told him it was illegal. He's coming back and trying to do it again. But there was never any doubt that this was going to have a poor impact on this economy.
That's how communists operate, isn't it? One guy calling all the shots. Well, look, it's time for us to pause for a quick break here. Stay with us on the Tan Talk Radio Network. Voice of Reason with Kevin Carey, Tom Skerritt, and me, Ed Golly, are going to come back and talk about billionaires shopping for a governor before voters have even had a chance to cast their ballots in the primaries. That and more of the issues the conservatives never want you to hear about.
Hey everyone, it is Brandy Joy with the Brandy Joy Joyride. Feel free to hop in and have a good time with us every Thursday from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. This show is brought to you by One Unit, dedicated to bringing people together, letting your voices be heard. And of course, we're here to entertain you, upbuild you, inspire you, and even hear from you. So every Thursday, tune in to 106.1 FM, Brandy Joy Joyride, and we will hear from you and let's have some fun.
You're listening to the Voice of Reason on the Tan Talk Radio Network.
Check out the Randall Jenkins Real Estate Hour every Wednesday from 5 to 6 p.m., where Randall will help you with things like down payment assistance, real estate tips, how to use AI to enhance your real estate experiences, real stories about real estate, nightmares, and triumphs. Also taking your phone calls and much more. That's the Randall Jenkins Real Estate Hour every Wednesday from 5 to 6 p.m. here on the Tan Talk Radio Network.
Don't turn it off now. You need this stuff. Tampa Bay's Tan Talk Radio Network.
Well, it was a huge primary win for progressives.
Yeah.
In the Democratic Party. Voters in Michigan picked progressive candidate Abdul Al-Sayed as the Democratic nominee for Senate. And he defeated Representative Haley Stevens, who was backed by the establishment wing of the party and has taken a more moderate approach to the race. It was the biggest test for progressives to see if their populist agenda, like Medicare for all, would bode well in a true swing states. If Democrats want to take control of the U.S. Senate in November, winning the seat is crucial to accommodating that goal or accomplishing it.
And that was a little bit like the canary in the coal mine, Ed, in that that was a very big indicator. It's been a very good year for progressives. And, Mike Rogers, who's the Republican nominee who lost 2 years ago, is a MAGA Trumper and has taken millions of dollars from the pharmaceutical industry and insurance industry. So we'll see what happens. I know that is it Haley Stevens who lost was saying, well, the other gentleman who won is not electable. Right now within the party, we're having what I think is a healthy debate as to where we are as a party. You're right about the elephant in the room. We've got this authoritarian dictator who's just made a shambles of this, not just this country, but the world order. So it is critical that the Democrats come together. I think they will. And Haley Stevens has said she will.
I hope so. I applaud the progressives too, but beware. We have got some serious difficulties within the Democratic Party, and we have to face those and resolve those, or at least resolve them to the point that we're all on the same team. Because, I see sort of strident opinions from progressives and moderates about, the direction of the party. All right. But that's not a bad thing, is to have, as you said, Kevin, an honest and respectful discussion of that. But we can't afford to have different factions in our party that are working against each other, and criticizing each other, because that's exactly what the Republicans are banking on. They really think that, I've heard it both ways. I've heard the Democrats say, we should just do nothing and let Trump just continue to fall apart and screw up, and then, declare victory on election day. And I've heard the Republicans say the same thing about the Democrats. The Democrats can't get out of their own way. And there's some truth to that. If we don't, check that, we're going to put ourselves in a lot of trouble.
There's the candidate who won in Michigan. He was opposed. He was about $60 million against him. He was portrayed as racist, as anti-Israel, and they said he was radical. Well, how was he radical? He was for Medicare for all. Is that a radical concept? He's against what ICE is doing. Is that radical? So we need to push a little bit. I don't want to hear anything from the MAGA Republicans. You're not in this tent. Just stay the hell out of this tent and go with Mike Rogers, who's got issues. And we can win that race. I mean, what these progressives are doing, and I think we're all on the same page here. We can have an internal debate within the party, but they're inspiring people. This guy has inspired people to come out and vote. And he barely won this race, but almost all of the mainstream Democrats were against him because they felt like he was, quote, unelectable is the tag you put on these people.
Yeah.
But he inspires people. I mean, no one, when Obama ran, no one even knew who he was. He'd just been elected U.S. Senator in Illinois, been a state senator. But he inspired people, as did John F. Kennedy, as did Clinton. So I think we sometimes underestimate these candidates. There is something happening in this party, but that this many progressives are doing this well. The mayor of New York. It's not just a blip. And so I'm excited to see the debate. And then but as you said, Tom, let's join together. I mean, the alternative is just a disaster, a disaster.
Well, circling back to what you were talking about, one of the rallying cries of the progressive left has been to get money out of politics. And as you pointed out, there were millions spent from outside groups, up to $52 million in Michigan, which is the most expensive use of outside spending apart from Texas's contentional and protracted Senate race. Following the Democratic Senate primary election of Abdul El Sayed in Michigan, Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders was asked by Rachel Maddow on MS Now about how he decides to support the candidates that he endorses.
So tell us about your strategy approaching primary nights like this and this overall primary season, how you've chosen which candidates to get behind and what you want the impact of your endorsements and your work with these candidates to be.
Well, what I am looking for, and progressives in general are looking for, are candidates who understand that the current economy is broken, it is rigged, that working people all over this country are at their wits' end. They're seeing the very rich getting richer while they are struggling. So first of all, we want candidates who have the guts to take on the billionaire class that today has unprecedented economic and political power. Second of all, we want candidates who understand you're not living in a democracy when billionaires can buy elections. And it's not just Elon Musk spending $270 million to elect Trump or saying he's going to spend another $100 million to elect Republicans to the Congress. Right now, you're seeing in Michigan. And what is so extraordinary about this race right now, Rachel, I have never seen anything like it. You're having a candidate, Abdul El Sayed, taking on the entire national Democratic leadership, the Michigan Democratic leadership, and he's taking on something like $60 million in super PAC funding, half of which comes from AIPAC. And as of right now, he is a few points ahead. We'll see what happens later on. And all of that tells me that we need candidates who have the guts to speak to the struggling of the working class of this country, stand up to billionaires, and those are the kinds of people we like supporting.
And those billions of dollars aren't limited to Michigan by any means. They're pouring into Florida to support Byron Donalds. We haven't even had the primary yet. And yet billionaires from within and out of state have been pouring all kinds of money into his campaign, apparently assuming that with Trump's endorsement, his nomination and perhaps the governorship is already in the bag. Nothing says government of the people quite like billionaires shopping for a governor before voters have even had a chance to cast their ballots. I mean, the Republican Party is governance of the rich, by the rich, and for the rich. And that demonstrates it. And the fact that the people aren't buying it in Michigan will hopefully be the same result here in Florida, where we'll get a governor who isn't selling out to these multi-millionaires and billionaires who want him in power to advance their interests and continue to line their pockets with money that comes out of the pockets of the working class.
Well, David Jolly sat in the chair that Tom is now sitting in about 4 months ago. And I'm sure at that time, virtually nobody thought he had a chance of winning that governor's race. He's leading in the polls right now.
Yeah.
And yes, the Republicans are worried about this, and they should be. And, David Jolly made the point at the time because he was questioned about his ability to raise money. And his point was if there's not enthusiasm in his race, it's going to be very hard. But if there is a blue wave, and I think there is going to be a blue wave, because people are fed up with what's been going on with this, both at the state and federal level, with the corruption, et cetera. But David Jolly has a very real chance of winning. And this all often goes back to Citizens United. Tom, as you know, as an attorney, the Supreme Court has said, and you know too, Ed, basically, free speech, rock and roll, let people put in millions from all over the country. And there's no free lunch when someone gives that much money to a candidate, there's a reason for it.
So what Ed said just sparked something in me, and that was, that this is a reality. I mean, these billionaires are they're buying these elections, right? We have a friend, Bob Busing, Karen Busing, but Bob was a guy that he and I were both interested in running for Florida Senate. And we got down to the very end and I chickened out and he did it. And I helped him as much as I could because I felt like I should. And he was a great guy. He's really smart. But what happened is that 2 weeks before the election, an election that looked like he was going to win, these big corporations came in and dumped millions into the coffers of his really, really incompetent opponent. And they just smeared his name. I mean, this guy's like a Boy Scout, I don't think he's ever done anything wrong in his life. But he, they said that he and his law firm had represented all these horrible people, and it was all just lies. Every bit of it was lies.
You wouldn't say that if you were me. He once prosecuted a slap suit against me.
Who did, Bob?
Bob Busing did,
he?
yeah.
Well,
it was a defamation suit. What the hell? He's a construction lawyer.
Right.
What does he know about defamation?
Well,
Nothing.
So Ed,
mercifully, he lost.
So Ed can't be objective about Bob Busing, but
No,
objectively,
I always told him, if you want to really have a stellar career, change parties. They like people like you who help thieves try to steal money from honest people, but instead he left the state.
Well, maybe I need to just conclude my comments.
I would. Again, I think Ed being sued by Bob, it makes it hard for him to be too objective. But I objectively, but your point is still well taken.
Yeah, I mean,
Tom.
it's just that they, and it's, for me, it's like opened my eyes. I've been involved in politics in Florida for 45 years, but until you really look at what it's like to be a candidate, and I never made it, it's daunting. You spend a lot of time, a lot of money, and then you have these big corporations come in and just buy it. One of the things, one of the strategies that I've seen that Ed, you were talking about was that you reveal their tactics. You say, hey, you use it against them. You say, look, the Costco has put in, $12 million in this little state Senate race. This one's done this. I'm not here for sale. He's here for sale. I'm not. I want to serve you, not them. And I've seen that, work a lot of the times because it's the truth.
I think part of the solution needs to be addressing the Supreme Court opinion in Citizens United. And I'm not a constitutional attorney, but I'd like to think there would be some congressional ability to address this, because what it's done, and it's been in law now for over 10 years or so, has just made it just chaos. It's who's the highest bidder.
So Kevin, if the new president came in and said, Kevin, how can we change this? Tell me how we get around Citizens United. What do you think we should do?
I don't have an answer in terms of the Constitution when the Supreme Court says it's free speech, but I do think you need to find some way to limit a campaign finance. I mean, this is not a radical concept. When I ran for judge, and Tom was very helpful. He was my campaign manager, matter of fact, did a wonderful job. He knows the ups and downs. As Tom said, at his house, he's had anyone from dog catcher to Obama literally at his house. And Tom, you don't spout your own horn, but you really have done a very good job in this community.
Thank you.
And you've done it for Republicans, Democrats, whoever you thought was the best candidate. But when I ran, there was a limit of $500, and that was a limit. Your wife could do it, your kid, your dog, I guess. But you have to find some way to limit. I don't know how you do it. I'm not a constitutional scholar, but this is not working. This system is just, all it does is breed corruption.
Well, I hear Bernie Sanders sometimes get criticized because he owns 2 or 3 houses, or Joe Biden, because he was in the Senate his whole career, wasn't he? So on a senator's salary, he has a couple houses that are worth a lot of money. Ken Paxton's wealth has increased by up to 7,000%. And I didn't misread that, while in elected office. And he now owns at least 15 properties worth nearly $10 million, including 4 condos at a luxury resort in Utah, 3 homes here in Florida, land in Hawaii. MS Now recently noted how Paxton's many real estate holdings have become an issue in the Texas Senate race as Paxton faces voter fraud allegations that tied him to allegedly lying about his residency in up to 6 elections. That's a second-degree felony under Texas law. Here's what Ryan Martin said. Who's he? He's the Democratic Party spokesperson in Texas. He says this, quote, while working Texans struggle to pay their mortgage and young people can't even afford to buy their first home, Paxton is using public office to get rich and buy 15 luxurious properties. Paxton has so many houses, he can't even keep track of which one to put for his voter registration. Texans are sick of corrupt politicians rigging the game against them, and it's exactly why Ken Paxton will lose in November. Incidentally, the official annual salary of the Texas Attorney General, $153,000 to 750 balloons. Now, how did he get all those houses on that money? And that's the net, gross income, not after tax income.
And Ed, don't you see that that's really a pattern?
I do.
I love to look at the tables. The newspaper, well, back when it was, true newspaper investigative reporting, they'd have charts and they'd say, and it was Republicans and Democrats, this was their net worth, on day one before they were elected. This is, halfway through their career, and this is now. And the numbers are staggering. It's, and people say, oh, they just did a good job. Well, good job at what?
Well, and that could be a bipartisan issue. I think both sides can agree that you should not be enriched. But, Gary Gibbons, who was sitting in your chair, whose uncle was Sam Gibbons, I don't think he got rich as a congressman. Jim Davis, one of our good friends who was in Congress as well. You get a good pension. You have a decent 6-figure salary, which is more than most people make. And it should not be a job that enriches you, particularly when you're making decisions that affect, people, the stock market. We talked about last week, $100,000 to get inside information from Trump. I mean, you talk about corruption.
That was the conservative minute this week, I think. But insider trading is still perfectly legal in Congress. Anna Luna's trying to do something about that, and yet now she's getting tagged for having tipped the decision for the vice presidency to some blogger who put a bet in on it and scored a lot of money. And the Republican Party, since she's a Republican, they won't even investigate it. But at least investigate. There's something like 3 different anonymous sources have come forward and said, yeah, she did this. We found out she did it. She told us, or we heard about it, or whatever. That to me is worth investigating. And yet here she is saying, well, we shouldn't have insider trading. I agree with her. We shouldn't. And it should extend all the way to the White House. I don't know why she limits it to the Senate.
We could do a whole show on Trump's sales of his own products, during his presidency, or, receipt of gifts from other governments, like his jet, which is defective.
By the way, he's now, I just heard on the way down here this morning, he's changed his tune on that jet or that plane. He says he may use it now.
Oh.
He said before that would just go to the library or the museum, whatever Trump's going to have when he leaves the White House. But now he's changed his tune on that too.
Yeah.
But all this money he's taking in, the crypto and the Trump coins, that's a direct violation of the Constitution's Emoluments Clause, right, which should be grounds for impeachment and removal from office. Yet the Republicans, who I say it over and over again, they're nothing but whores. They don't stand up for the oath that they took, and they don't care about this Constitution or this country. They're the ones that don't like America or its Constitution or democracy. Because they don't stand up for what their oath said when they were sworn into office and do what they're supposed to do.
And I think that's the bigger story. We always knew that Trump was a narcissistic sociopath. He is. He's mentally, he's not mentally healthy. But just the story to me is and always will be these sycophants who did not have the guts and the courage to do their job to support the Constitution.
Exactly. I want to get to our quote just a little bit early today because I want to talk about it. It's from Lyndon Johnson. And here's what he said, quote, "If you can convince the lowest white man he's better than the best colored man, he won't know you're picking his pocket. He'll give him someone to look down on." He said, "Hell, give him someone to look down on and he'll empty his pockets for you," unquote. Now, I've read articles that are very convincing that suggest that that's the whole reason that we don't have universal health care in this country, is because white nationalists say, I'd rather go without health care myself than to provide it for minorities, Latinos or black people or anybody who isn't a white nationalist. And I think there's a lot of truth to that.
Well, it's a mystery why these people that don't have a lot of money in these red states think Trump gives a damn about how they're doing. Yeah, he certainly hasn't helped them. Their balance sheet or their bank account is way down from what, in terms of when you take into account inflation. So I thought that Lyndon Johnson quote from many years ago still holds water.
Yeah, it is. And it works in 32 out of 33 industrialized nations, and yet we say, we'd rather have private health care where we spend twice as much per capita and don't get better results. But I think if there's a foundation to it that keeps that system in place, that's what it is. It's racism is alive and healthy here in America today. That's all the time we have. Join us again next Thursday morning for another edition of The Voice of Reason. I want to thank my co-hosts, Kevin Carey, Tom Skerritt. I'm Ed Golly, reminding you, if the statement seems a little too implausible to be true, don't believe it just because a conservative said it.
Make them prove it.
WTAN, Clearwater.
FM 106.1.
WDCF, Dade City.
FM 102.3.
Listen.
Dr. Anthony Fauci held in contempt of Congress. I'm Dave Anthony, Fox News, a week after answering no questions at a Senate COVID hearing.
All he had to do was tell the truth. More than 100